The last 2 years have been really good for Nintendo. Within that time, they revealed the Switch, and once it launched in March of 2017, the world of video games was forever changed. Starting with launching the Switch with a once-in-a-generation game in Zelda Breath of the Wild, they followed up with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Splatoon 2, and later in 2017, Super Mario Odyssey. 2018 brought us a slew of second-tier releases like Mario Tennis Aces and Super Mario Party, with the only real heavy hitters being the two Let's Go Pokemon games and, of course, Nintendo's real juggernaut, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Still, in less than 2 years, Nintendo has built an incredible library for prospective Switch buyers to consider, and consumers have responded to the tune of Nintendo selling more than 32 million Switches. Now that we are less than a month away from the Switch being on sale for 2 full years, I think it is a good time to think about what Nintendo can do better in 2019. First and foremost, as always, are the games. 2019 promises to have some heavy hitters, but there are still significant gaps in the release schedule. We know Nintendo is bringing Yoshi's Crafted World next month, and Fire Emblem Three Houses sometime in the spring, which extends into late June. After that, we are aware of the potential releases of Animal Crossing, Luigi's Mansion 3, and Pokémon Generation 8. We have not seen anything from Animal Crossing or Pokémon, and have only a short trailer for Luigi's Mansion, so we aren't even sure that any of those games won't slide into next year. We can still assume all of those games come, but that still leaves another 5 months without releases. Nintendo recently suggested that there's at least one big unannounced game coming this year, so that will fill a gap somewhere. That still does leave some gaps, and that brings us to the next thing that Nintendo needs to work on, and that is continuing to build third-party support. The Switch is finally starting to pick up new games from third parties on a more consistent basis. For 2019, major confirmed third-party releases are as follows: Tales of Vesperia, Trials Rising, Final Fantasy VII, 9, 10, 10-2, and 12, Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, Mortal Kombat 11, Team Sonic Racing, Crash Team Racing, Dragon Quest Builders 2, and Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. That's not including the next Wolfenstein or Doom Eternal, both of which are confirmed for the Switch whenever they actually release. That is a huge improvement over the last 2 years, where it was basically assumed that new games were going to skip the Switch. That said, there's still a ton of room for improvement. I think Nintendo needs to continue to present to developers and entice them to bring their games to the Switch. They have nearly 2 years of data to show that it makes absolute fiscal sense for third parties to bring their games to the Switch. Every report of some third-party game, whether it is an indie game selling the best on Switch, or a major release like Civilization VI substantially exceeding Take-Two's expectations, also bolsters this argument. What kind of games does Nintendo need to get on the Switch? Well, major annual releases like Madden and Call of Duty would, I think, sell extremely well, but there are other considerations when bringing games like that to the platform, and that brings us to lowering cartridge prices, which seems to also be happening as well. There were rumors that Take-Two and Rockstar wanted to bring Grand Theft Auto V to the Switch last year, but 32GB cartridges proved too cost prohibitive. Nintendo can only do so much here, but is it too much to consider subsidizing the cost for developers who want to bring larger games to the platform? Something has to give, otherwise the Switch will continue to be passed up for those larger games. Couple this with a new Switch model with at least 64GB of storage, if not 128, and that could go a long way to solving this issue as we move forward. If nothing else, Nintendo can go the route of including a 64 or 128GB micro SD card in the box as they did with a 4GB card back in the early days of the 3DS. How else can you shore up continued third-party support? By continuing to improve Nintendo Switch Online. The recent announcement that developers can use Vivox's voice chat functionality on the Switch is a major win for the platform. But Nintendo still needs to improve the base offering. They could also finally launch Super NES games on the service, which would serve to continue growing that user base. It really does need to get better, and as it stands, it could be a barrier to entry for games like Madden or Call of Duty, whose major selling points are through online play. Sure, that is purely speculation, but we all know that the service needs work. Given that people are paying for it, I think Nintendo will continue to make changes and improvements. Otherwise, you'll start to see people declining to renew the service when we get to the service's 1-year mark later in 2019. Finally, I think it would be helpful if Nintendo would have a Direct at least every 2 months. Nintendo receives an incredible PR boost before and after every Direct, and they simply dominate the social media and news cycle for a full week. You have to think that third parties, including independent developers as well as major publishers, love the additional free exposure their games receive when millions of people tune into a Direct. Honestly, Nintendo could have a Direct every 2 weeks and still maintain a huge audience for every single one. If Directs were more frequent, they wouldn't need to be 30 to 40 minutes long. They could give us development updates on games previously announced, and maybe go further into detail on games they were announcing in lieu of 1-minute montages consisting of 15 to 30 games. 2019 has the potential to be a great year for Nintendo. Sure, they still have some work to do and some gaps to fill, but it is still early, and if there's one thing that Nintendo has proven over the last few years, it is that they are willing to do whatever it takes to ensure that the Switch succeeds and continues to do so for the foreseeable future.